Hey, this is Zacklog the Great, and I am here tonight with Travis.
Hello.
And with Nate.
Good to be back.
And we are getting together tonight to talk about J.R.R. Tolkien's poem, The Song of Beren and Luthíen. So, as usual, before we get rolling, I would like to remind everybody, if you like my work, if you like what I do, please consider supporting me via subscribestar.com. That's subscribestar.com/Zacklog-the-great. And I also just added ko.fi. It's ko-fi.com/Zacklog. Would be another way if you prefer that. Buy me a coffee. Of course, not going to do this every time, but I think twice is fair. Nate?
Yes, I actually have started posting some YouTube videos. Mine is less about literature and more about theology, philosophy, morality, those sort of things. I've got 2 videos up, Dangerous God and Weak Virtues, if you would like to check them out. I would very much appreciate your views, and if you find me interesting, then go ahead and subscribe. Thanks.
And I will put a link to Nate's channel also in the description. So, having said that, let me get the poem up on the screen. Still trying to... there we go. Share screen. No. Share application. Yes. And which one are we looking at? Is that it? I think that's it. Yeah. Here we go. Is it visible?
Trying to be.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. So, The Song of Beren and Luthíen by J.R.R. Tolkien. Leaves were long, the grass was green, the hemlock umbles tall air, and in the glade a light was seen of stars and shadow shimmering. Tinuviel was dancing there to music of a pipe unseen, and light of stars was in her hair, and in her raiment glimmering. There Beren came from mountains cold, and lost he wandered under leaves, and where the elven river rolled he walked alone and sorrowing. He peered between the hemlock leaves, and saw in wonder flowers of gold upon her mantle and her sleeves, and her hair like shadow following. Enchantment healed his weary feet that over hills were doomed to roam, and forth he hastened, strong and fleet, and grasped at moonbeams glistening. Through woven woods and elven homes she lightly fled on dancing feet, and left him lonely still to roam in the silent forest listening. He heard thereof the flying sound of feet, as light as linden leaves, or music welling underground in hidden hollows quavering. Now withered lay the hemlock sheaves, as one with sighing sound, whispering fell the beechen leaves in the wintry woodland wavering. He sought her ever, wandering far, where leaves of years were thickly strewn, by light of moon and ray of star, in frosty heaven shivering. Her mantle glinted in the moon, as on a hilltop high and far, she danced, and at her feet was strewn a mist of silver quivering. When winter passed, she came again, and her song released the sudden spring, like rising lark and falling rain, and melting water bubbling. He saw the elven flowers spring about her feet, and healed again, he longed by her to dance and sing upon the grass untroubling. Again she fled, but swift he came to Nuviel. He called her by her elvish name, and there she halted, listening. One moment stood she, and a spell his voice laid on her. Beren came, and doom fell on Tinuviel, that in his arms lay glistening. As Beren looked into her eyes, within the shadows of her hair, the trembling starlight of the skies he saw there mirrored, shimmering. Tinuviel, the elven fair, immortal maiden, elven wise, about him cast her shadowy hair, and arms like silver glimmering. Long was the way that fate them bore, o'er stony mountains cold and gray, through halls of iron and darkling door, and woods of nightshade morrowless, The sundering seas between them lay, and yet at last they met once more. And long ago they passed away, in the forest singing, sorrowless. Woo!
That was a good read.
So,
That had to be like 12 words.
So, I just spent 3 or 4 minutes reading. Would one of you care to run with the first impressions?
I guess I can start.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
So, I'm sure I'm coming at this all wrong, but it is fascinating being a single man out there looking for a woman. And this seems to be the general pattern, where you find an attractive woman, you spy her, and then she runs away. And this seems to fit beyond the human species, with deer and elk and whatnot. And the man's job is to chase after her. So this is what I was thinking about when I read this, and thought that it was interesting in that respect.
Yeah, then that is the pattern, and then of course you have the weird problem that it's difficult for guys to tell the difference between no, leave me alone, and no, keep trying.
Yeah, the whole coy thing.
But that is part of the way, like, that's part of, human relationships. That's part of, how we get together is, very often, part of it is, she wants to see, are you actually, seriously interested in me, or is this just a momentary thing? And, push him off and, make him try harder, make him ask again is one way of testing that. So, Nate, how about you?
Or flee through the hemlock leaves and make him retrieve a legendary artifact.
That was her dad.
Starlight from the very brow of ultimate evil.
That was her dad.
You tried that one, Travis.
Wait, what's that? Say this again, Nate.
Have you tried recapturing, one of the greatest artifacts lost to time from the very brow of ultimate evil? Have you tried that? That's hard to say no to.
Yeah, I suppose I haven't been able to accomplish that just yet, which is probably why I'm still single.
Well, Aragorn did it by being very, very pretty and, virtuous. So you can at least try virtuous.
So, yes, for those who are not previously aware, well, okay, for one piece of context, this poem actually is in the book, The Lord of the Rings. And, sorry, one moment. Aragorn recites it to the hobbits, to, basically keep their mind off how awful everything is at the moment, when they are camped out on Weathertop. I think that's before they are attacked by the Ringwraiths, and Frodo receives his one of his enduring wounds. And then the other part of the context for this is actually part of a story that is that a lot more of it is told in Tolkien, the kind of the prequel to the Lord of the Rings. Well, the double prequel, I guess. I don't know. The Silmarillion, which has just an enormous amount of kind of history and mythology of Middle Earth, and it includes this story. And so yeah, it's one of the really fascinating things about J.R.R. Tolkien is his ability to create a world that feels it feels like a world that's actually there, that you're learning pieces of a real history rather than someone making up a story. And it's not to say other authors don't do that, but I don't think I've read anyone who does so as convincingly as him. Do I need to keep going?
I'm kind of with you on that. I'm sort of thinking about it, and I'm like, going back. I'm like, there's some guys whose world building I really appreciate, but yeah, no, you always get the feeling that no, this is only an excuse to tell a story. Whereas the closest thing I can get to it is Dwarf Fortress, to be honest with you, which is that this is just a simulator that was, this is something that was created, and the stories just kind of happened, because of it.
Well, and also if you look at how Tolkien actually wrote these books, like he came up with the languages, like he invented a bunch of languages, and then he said, okay, well, languages develop in a particular way because of history. So what's the story that made this word what it is, and how does it connect to this other word? And like, I don't even know how many languages he invented several complete languages. To say the man was a genius seems, well, I guess also I think the word has been, I think, somewhat cheapened, but I think it's fair to say that J.R.R. Tolkien was a genius, and there's, like I said, there's not, in terms of making what feels like a real world that exists outside of our own, there's not really a competitor. So.
And, but to go back to the poem itself, it's interesting, that, this idea of like the epic pursuit, because I mean, you think of like, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, pursuing the Uruk-hai, and it was like this legendary chase, that they covered like leagues and leagues of space, just running nonstop for days. And then you think about it, but some of the stuff that goes on in the Silmarillion is like ridiculous. It's like, okay, guys, we're good. Knock it off.
Well, go ahead, keep going.
But the fact that this isn't, like, hey, I'm pursuing my enemy to destroy him, that, we're doing this out of love, is, it shows sort of this idea of love that you don't get very much anymore. Like, the idea that I'm going to, like, stay on this through, decades of life, through pain of death, rebirth, and I will still come back around to loving you because, I've been struck to the core, it's like that I'm pierced to the soul with love for this person. And that eventually, it just has to overcome. And it's like, just, okay.
Well, and it's another thing, and one other reason I chose this poem, because it has the fictional backstory of where Beren came from and how he met her, and then her father's rejection of him and attempt to basically kill him by sending him on an impossible task to win her hand. There's also a real-life biographical backstory to this poem, which I don't know if either of you saw. I should have mentioned. I should have sent you this as for additional homework. But one moment. But what was J.R.R. Tolkien, like C.S. Lewis, was a soldier in World War I. and he, if I remember it correctly, he ended up getting sent back from the front when he got, I think, trench fever, it was called, and he was recuperating in England, but he was in the trenches, he was on these battlefields, and he saw this, I mean, just psychologically scarring horror that you know pretty almost none of us, almost no one who's like listening to this is going to experience something like that, which
Thankfully.
Is yes. Yes. And then while he was back in England, he was one day he was just out in a like outdoors in like a meadow with the woman who would eventually be his wife, and they actually had a you know theirs was a bit of a Romeo and Juliet, no, you're not marrying this person kind of story also, but while he was out there, she started just dancing to, they didn't have they didn't have portable music players like we do too, so presumably there was music that she was dancing to in her head, but he saw her dancing, and the beauty of this woman that he loved, dancing in the green grass, and the contrast of that with like this blood and torment that he had been through, was part of why he wrote this poem. And actually, on their gravestones are the names of these characters. He was Beren and she was Luthíen, and that's some pretty cool backstory too. So
yeah, I mean, I like how the story, it takes sort of your whole gentry romance and ups the stakes to like just ridiculousness, because she is one of the she was a high elf, she's immortal, they're sort of like the first children of the gods, and so for a man to even approach her is like, yeah, okay, there's a reason her dad was like, he's not good enough. He is made of mortal, frail crap. There is literally nothing he can offer you besides sadness. And so, he says, fine, you know what? Prove yourself, human. Prove yourself, man. Go retrieve me a Silmaril from the brow of, freaking Morgoth or whatever. Just be like, yeah, go do it. Go ahead.
So
punch Satan in the face take his bling, and make it back out. And tell you what, then you can marry the girl. And she, for her part, loved him, and not only was willing to give up, her station as like, this high and powerful individual, she gave up an eternity to be with him. She chose mortality and love over, just an eternity of growing power and, among, these hauntingly beautiful people. She could have found herself an elf man and they would have loved each other for millennia, but she chose
so
to
her and
love
Orlando Bloom.
Right. She could have had Orlando Bloom, but instead she chose, I don't know. I'm not going to say Viggo Mortensen because he's already Aragorn. He got his own elf babe. But good God, though, what casting they did for that. That was perfect. I was like, man. But anyway, yeah, so it's like it takes the whole, the crusty, upper crust father being like, no, never you. You knave, you wretch, you're unworthy. Nothing you could ever do would be enough for her hand. And then he says, what if I do the thing that absolutely can't be done and that you jackanapes have failed to do for, 5,000 years now? They're like, well, It's stuff like that. I just love how it takes that sort of, that plot and just raises it to the maximum. It's just like all in, baby. Here we go.
So that is part of the story that happens beyond this poem, outside this poem. Describing.
You could kind of say it's in the middle, towards the end.
It's unspoken in the poem when he returns and in his arms is starlight shimmering, or whatever it says. That's after he had gone and punched Satan in the face, stolen his bling, and returned.
So long was the way that fate them bore, o'er stony mountains cold and gray, through halls vired and darkling door, and woods of nightshade morrowless. That's the part of the story they're talking about. And for those who haven't read the Silmarillion, and I read it once, and I need to pull it out and read it again because that was in high school, and I know I don't look it, but high school was a while ago for me. So I need to read it again. But for those who have not read the Silmarillion, Morgoth, who Beren was assigned to steal back one of the Silmarils from, Morgoth was Sauron's boss, like thousands of years before. Morgoth was probably the guy who occasionally slapped Sauron around like a little bitch when he was tired of when Sauron had failed him. And that's the guy who Beren is sent to, to sneak in and steal this back from. And not only that, Luthíen managed to, enchant him and sing him to sleep so that they could do this, which more or less worked. They got the jewel, and then lost it later. But they did get it from Morgoth. So, excuse me. So it's, yeah. But, and also, like Travis was saying, just in the, in the nature, in the poem itself, what you see here is very much like, I wouldn't say almost like an archetypal love story. That, a man is entranced by the beauty of a woman, he pursues her, she withdraws, and he has to continue, and he has to prove himself. And then they come, and then they're finally joined together after her father sends him to face down an eldritch horror. Wait, that's
Eldritch. No, Eldritch horror doesn't do it justice. He is literally the divine rebel. Like when sort of God Prime and the other sort of minor pantheon are all singing the universe into existence, this is beautiful harmony, Morgoth decides to throw a little metal in it, and they're like, dude, calm down, you're messing this up. And you're creating these discords and this terrible stuff. Until the point that Iluvatar, sort of God Prime, is like, enough. No more singing from you. You have no part in this creation. So he says, rather than accept that, I'm going to actually descend from our divine plane, bring as much of my malevolent power as I can into the thing you are creating and destroy it from within. And so that's what he did. That's Morgoth.
So,
So yeah, no, he's literally Satan. He's worse than Cthulhu. He's worse than any of these sort of eldritch horrors and under the bed monsters. He's literally the devil. Except for, unlike the devil, he actually was imbued with his own set of power.
Well, and and like I said, Sauron was basically one of his high lieutenants, and so the terrifying evil of the Lord of the Rings was just the second in command to this guy. So,
in the wars of sorrow, against Morgoth, right, is like, I'm probably naming that incorrectly, but like they had epic battles where like one of the reasons the elves are rare in later days is because Morgoth killed so many of them. Like, he's the one that created the dragons. He created the Balrogs. Like, all these, like, you know, epic tier monsters. He had legitimate battalions of these things. And so, you know, he would, you know, loose them in battle. You know, like when they finally assaulted his fortress, it was a bloodbath. It was a slaughter. You know, and so, like I said, it changed the balance of power in Middle Earth forever.
So, Travis, how about you? What's your thoughts at the moment?
So I guess it's the third from the last stanza where again she fled, but swift he came, and he calls her name. And then one moment stood she, and a spell his voice laid on her. Beren came, and doom fell on Tinuviel, that in his arms lay glistening. I thought doom was an interesting word choice. Perhaps it's so strong because of what you just described in the history of she's actually giving up her elfdom.
Well,
But at least I wasn't sure if she like died because she.
Yes, because she. Well, actually, I think they died twice. Well, he died twice. Beren actually ended up dying in the course of, you know, or being mortally wounded in the course of the, you know, adventures that Nate was talking about. And then, what's her? Oh my brain's gone. And Luthíen actually went to the hall. Yeah, the halls of the dead. Went to, you know, effectively the Hades. I guess would be, you know, the Greek mythology parallel. And she pulled a reverse Orpheus, and she, you know, sang so you know, persuasively that that the Mandos, oh, I can't remember, but he decided to send them both back as mortals, and, you know, they lived a you know, normal human life on Earth, which I think at that time was probably longer. But they lived in.
They were the Beren was old stock human, so like they still lived a few hundred years.
But they lived out a lifespan on Earth together. And then, you know, she died, which, you know, like Nate said earlier, that didn't have to happen for her. That was what she chose. And then there's also, today Doom has, you know, pretty negative connotations with it. But in the older sense, it was just judgment or fate. And so, you know, this was the fate, and this was fate coming to her. These were how things would fall out for her. And so,
Okay.
it's not just like doom. You're doomed. You're going to die. It's, you know, this is your fate, and it's not necessarily bad or not all bad. It's just, you know, what will be. Whew.
That makes sense. That seems to fit better.
Yeah, it's one of those cool words that is sort of the language has evolved a bit when it comes to the usage of that one.
Right.
Oh, but I don't know. Other than, like, you know, going into a little bit more description of their story, I don't feel like I have a ton more to say about this one. I like the poem. It did take me a while to memorize it. It's hard. It's kind of funny. And I said this before. You know, some of them I can get very, very quickly. Some of them kind of take a while, and this one took a while. But I feel like I've said most of what I have. Nate?
I'll let Travis go first, and then I'll do the last bit.
Travis, were there any other things you felt you needed to mention?
Well, I know there were, but I'm not coming up with them now, which is unfortunate, of course.
Start making notes. Write them down.
I should probably make some notes. That would be good.
We're gonna start up the next video about Beren and Luthíen.
Oh, I know the point that I wanted to make. If I can find the actual place where it is. All right, he heard there off the flying sound of feet as light as linden leaves, or music welling underground in hidden hollows quavering. And that made me think of, he's chasing her, he's trying to find her, and the role of imagination in the whole love dance, if you will call it that. I mean, in a sense, it's all of this extra glow that he is giving to this being that he merely glimpsed, and he's suddenly head over heels falling in love and chasing her through the forest, over the mountains and rocks, and tearing his feet up. But he imagines, at least, or maybe perhaps he does hear, these fleet feet and the sound of music. I just thought that's an interesting thing to consider in the realm of love. What's real and what isn't? Is this her passing that he's hearing, or is this really just his imagination?
Yeah, that's it's also interesting, having been, married for 10 years, and you look back and you're like, I do love this person. This is something real. This is something that had lasted. But at the same time, like when you're first, falling in love, it is a little bit like you're drugged. It is.
Exactly.
No, actually, you are. You actually are high on drugs. Your brain is producing so much, like, oxytocin and what's the other one that makes you feel good? It's basically blasting your whole being with feel-good hormones. Serotonin. Yeah. Being around that person literally gets you high on drugs. You are actually addicted to that person. They say it lasts between 2 and 3 years. That if you maintain, fairly regular contact with them, that effect will last. That's the sort of infatuation period. So it doesn't feel like you're on drugs. You actually are.
And then there's, unfortunately, the people who think that's supposed to be your whole life. And
the rest of it is resting a Silmaril from the brow of, Morgoth. This is what I actually wanted to say. This actually dovetails very neatly with what I wanted to say. So allow me to launch. Travis, other young single men out there, and any young single women that might be watching, kind of take the distive counterpart of this. Be willing to be, the epic hero. Do what you have to do, right? Don't think, don't try and have too much pride in it. Now, don't go off doing like a bunch of stuff that's going to get you killed. All right. I will say, please don't actually try and go tear the turban off of, the leader of Al-Qaeda or something and bring it back to her. You'll probably earn a lot of AK-47 rounds for that. But, be willing to go, kind of beyond dignity a little bit, I mean, for God's sake, if, you're interested and you think she's interested, don't be afraid to dance and sing with her. Even if you suck at dancing and singing, like I do. Because here's a hint. They're not looking for skill. They're looking for the endearing quality of being willing to do so. Right? Fed. Show that you're willing to work hard for her. Show that you're willing to play with her. Right? Don't just think that you have to, play it cool or whatever. Bring some heat to the situation. Like I said, be willing to go beyond. Don't just, don't think that you just have to be, flawless. Here's the thing. Women like our flaws. They do. They want to know that, we need them, but they also want to know that we're going to have fun being with them. So do that. And girls, young women that are watching. In fact, if you're girls, I'm going to go ahead and count to you. Stop doing that and go ahead and just become women. Women are better than girls. Okay? Go ahead, grow up, mature, get beyond the girl stage. I've met 45-year-old girls and I couldn't stand them. And I've met 15-year-old, I've met 17-year-old women who are the salt of the earth. Be women. All right? Grow past your childhood. But I'm going to make Travis mad. Make them chase you. We are persistence predators as a species. Our whole makeup is designed to see something that we want and pursue it until it cannot evade us any further. Now, don't take that too much to the extremes, but I will say this, young ladies. If you want to find good men, make them come get you.
Well, and
if women aren't making you go get them, they're probably not worth the pursuit in the first place.
And the more general principle that goes along with that is the easier something is won, the less it is valued. The less work you have to do to get something, the less it's going to matter to you. And if a woman gives everything away with no demands, she'll be dropped at the next opportunity.
Yep. So, like I said, understand that life is an adventure, and the only thing you're promised in life is the adventure. So find someone worth adventuring with. All right. I tell people my wife is the best support player I've ever met in my life, and thank God for it because I suck at that. But I will say this. I like to tell people I've been through half a dozen different lives with her, and I look forward to seeing what the next one's going to be like, too. There was us together. There's us when we met each other, and we were both, single and kind of dumb. There was, then there's us as newlyweds. There's us going into the military. There's us as brand new parents. And now there's us out of the military, with all the, with our 3 kids going into, a whole nother phase of life. And one day we'll have teenagers, and one day we won't have kids anymore. They'll be out of the house, and we will be on our own just to be us again. And in all of these things, nothing but adventure, nothing but change, but nothing but good times. But you know what? I had to work dog bone hard to win her love and keep it. And I still have to, because she's worth it. And honestly, I'm glad she ran away.
Okay. Well.
Sounds like good sound experience and advice.
I try.
All right. Well, that was our talk on Tolkien's Song of Beren and Luthíen. And, if you haven't read The Lord of the Rings, even if you've seen the movies, please go read the books. There is a lot more there. And if you're really feeling adventurous, you can get yourself a copy of the Silmarillion and dive in further. And then I guess since then there's actually one of his sons has been systematically editing and releasing a lot more of the Lord of the Rings backstory. And like I said, one of the most impressive things about Tolkien is just the sense that there is another world there, and it's and you don't. I mean, the movies aren't bad. There are flaws, which I could talk about. There are a couple of things that really bother me that I could talk about at length, which I won't tonight. But
that's good. I've only got 10% battery left.
I might actually make that one of my videos on my own, just like watch the Lord of the Rings movies and note a few things that like, okay, it's a good movie, but here's some things to think about. Anyway, but yeah,
Oh, it sounds like
that,
leftism to me.
I'm not I'm not saying like that. I'm saying as compared with this masterpiece of literature. So, and like you can fall pretty far from that height and still be pretty good. So anyway, thank you guys for getting together with me tonight. And God be with you.
Also with you.